And as a caster, I should know big words. Like, I'm sorry, I can't help you out. Internationals, the prep is insane. Like, I have big prep days.
Casting Chinese coming soon. You heard it
Oh, yeah,
first.
jeez. Okay, cool. I'm kind of like a team leader now. I put the prep into it, but I also need days off. So I'm going to fail somewhere here, and I'm going to rely on improv no matter how much prep I've done.
Let's get right into it. So, hello and welcome. I have a very special guest with me today who I've been looking to interview for ages, especially within the League of Legends scene. So we'll start off right at the bat of introduce yourself, tell people who you are, where you come from, everything, a little bit of that.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Hysterics. I'm a 30-year-old male now, unfortunately. Yeah, that was hard when I realized I had to turn 30. I work for League of Legends, have been for the past 10 years. I essentially got lucky, stumbled into a gig, and when I was back in Oceania, and like that a friend found, by the way, and then worked at a craft while working at a restaurant, grinded it out, and now I'm lucky enough to call myself a full-time League of Legends commentator who lives in Berlin, Germany. I never thought I'd end up here from all the way from Australia, from Sydney. So it's been a big leap.
No, I'm so jealous, man. It's so awesome. But I want to head straight into it. So I have been doing my research a little bit. I will be
Nice.
honest. I understand when you were in Oceania, you worked as a contractor, right? For about 3 years.
Yeah,
I
was contractor for and I mean, still technically now, and I'm trying to think, have I ever been full-time employed? I guess China was like 9-month contracts, but it was still contract, right? I was never called an employee. So yeah, I was a contractor from 2015 to 2018 before I then started getting in the turning process of the big interview process that led me to LPL to China. So yeah, three years about.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people early on, they look more towards these bigger casters for help within that. But what I want to talk about is, how did you first get into it? What made that jump of word of mouth into, that made it solid instead of just, kind of wishy-washy in a way.
No, I was trying to look for the word here. Cronketize. I like that. And as a caster, I should know big words. Like, I'm sorry to help you out. But I got lucky, right? So 2015, I was wanting to go and do television, film, acting, voiceovers, anything. I worked for some of the Foxtel, which is like the cable company channels, when I was like 16 years old in grade 10. And I wanted to go into that field. And then my friend literally stumbled, as we used to play League of Legends together back in season 2. He stumbled upon it as we started picking up the game and learning more. He's like, hey, there's this forum post from Pastry Time, who now works more on the broadcasting side things of NA, was an OPL caster at the time who did LPL as well. He put a post up in the forum locally saying, we're looking for a Challenger Series caster. My friend Nick found it and sent it to me and was like, oh, this would suit you. Because at the time I had one YouTube video up on my channel back then that was literally just me casting the solo queue game. I was like, okay, I'll just use that and I'll send it in. And I sent it in, and it merited a callback somehow. And I actually ended up casting with him in like an interview about 3 weeks later. And then he liked it and said, yeah, cool. Because I went for a play-by-play position because I was looking for one of each, the analyst and the shoutcaster, the play-by-play. And then they put me in room with the producer online. About a week later, I did the same thing I did with him again and this producer. They said, yeah, cool. And then brought me on to Oceanic Challenger Series in 2015, the start of 2015. So that means this interview would have taken place, end of 2014, which is ages ago. So 11 years ago, this interview happened. And then, yeah, plunked on screen, first time, knew nothing about it. Those VODs still exist somewhere for 2015 that I cast with Rusty, who used to do, LPL as well, and used to do international events, and has long since kind of disappeared from the scene. But him and I casted together first time, and it was like the most raw thing you've ever seen. And that was kind of my entrance. And it didn't like flow from there. I didn't suddenly start getting heaps of gigs from there. I actually had to kind of find my way through and work with ESL Australia for a bit, who were just starting up, who were Nick Fazzetti and a bunch of like 5-6 local guys who just worked their ass off. And then I had to go through and do production stuff and do stuff for OPL behind the scenes and like do open ladder, which was below that. So yeah, that cast was like the start, but there was a massive bridge in between it, if you know what I mean. A bridge I had to build.
Yeah, I mean, talking of, building that bridge, I understand you casted like World of Tanks and Rocket League and CSGO beforehand, right? How was that?
Oh my god. Okay, so no offense to World of Tanks, like it's cool. The concept is cool, but talking about bat chats and like all the different types of tanks and like the tank shell bounces, we're gonna wait for the reload 10 seconds later. Like it's super strategical. It was a completely different angle, I guess. And I did that in 2017, 2018, I think, which was a while ago. And that was like totally slow pace, a little bit boring for me, but I understood the appeal. And it was good. It got me out of my comfort zone, but it also just got me to learn, like, how do I keep things entertaining when there's nothing going on or there's like a lot more leeway than there is in League of Legends? How important is my personality here, so on and so forth. And then there's the other game you said Rocket League.
Yeah, I've got Rocket League as well on here.
So Gfinity came to Australia in 2018. And before that, I was working for a company called Throwdown, which did the OCE League that led to the RLCS. And that was the opposite of like World of Tanks is here, League is here, and then Rocket League is up here, where it's like it's always up. You're short and sharp. You're short and sharp. You're leading for the goal. You're punching and like you're hitting your big statement. Your energy's high for 5 minutes. It's like barely do you bring it back down. You bring it down to 20%, but then you come back up all the time. So it really helped me develop a dynamic of what is the audience like here? Like, what do the other casters sound like? Okay, cool. What can I bring to the table that's unique? How do I bring my personality through? And I think that kind of accelerated me in terms of like that development that led me to LPL, to like a more full-time job, a bigger paying job internationally, and opportunities to open towards like those international Riot events. And I owe it to those games to bringing me out of my comfort zone and teaching me that like a caster is not just someone who, just learns the game and gets in front of the screen and talks. Like caster's an entertainer, and your entertainment value changes per game you're in. You can be yourself, but it's like, I'm going to be myself within Rocket League. I'm going to be myself within the World of Tanks, within League of Legends. These are different games. Even CS, I did for a little bit in 2018 as well. And it's like, you have to be moldable, but you still want to show your personality, if that makes sense.
100%. I mean, talking about adaptability with personality, right? You talked a lot about beforehand the three things. I'm not sure if I'm going to spark a memory back here, but it's being humble, no ego, and showing respect. So you talked equally a lot about casting is learning what it's like outside the game, like it's working in a kitchen, right? More about teamwork with your other caster rather than, being that knowledge of the game. Of course, knowledge of the game is going to help, right? But how much adaptability would you say you have to do per game with those three kind of be humble, no ego, show respect type of things?
So I always would go into shows or I'd go into offices and meet people, and I'd be a pleasure to work with, because I think that was so important that I was coming in, like, as you said, with like no ego and making sure that everyone was pleased to pleased to work with me. I would just do whatever, right? And I think that was like one of the most important things, and I still think it's one of the most important things, because being able to work with everyone and being able to mend and mold, not only with the broadcast but with your talent, means that like you're also elevating their level. And I'm trying to think this I could say this in so many different directions, but I feel like especially early on when I was working with other casters, I talked to them about what they want, what do they want to bring to the show, what do they care about, what are their interests. And for me, and that's part of my role too, right? Like I think play-by-plays are very like that's very much pigeonholed into their role, where they want to elevate colors and make them sound better. They want to make sure their analysts are sounding like $1 million and not throwing them in the deep end, right? And so I would always talk about being humble and being like having no ego, because I've seen a lot of pairings where the play-by-play comes in and goes with the ego and goes, no, we shouldn't be talking about it. We shouldn't be doing about this. And sure, at a higher level, maybe you have an argument when your pairing might be a little bit lower, but I think especially when I was coming in like as a fresh face, I tried to adapt that, not only because it was instilled in me by like my father and, you know, like being respectful and being a joy to work with, but it was always like, I think this helps make a better show, if that makes sense, because there's one less thing going wrong. And if I can help make a show by like making everyone else's life easier, making my co-caster sound better, and making sure they want to bring me back, so I also, it benefits me, right? I get more work. Then yeah, it just seems like a no-brainer to me. Did that answer your question? I feel like
Yeah, no, I'd say that would. I mean, it's more about learning what you can do outside, right? Which we'll get on to a bit later,
yeah,
like the environment and stuff like that. But it's a lot about, as you said, learning your environment. How can you bring others up? Of course, play by play, you are going to shout at the game, right? But that's not
of
all you're
course.
going to do.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love casting games where it's just absolute Eminem rapping type of speed and shouting at the screen. So fun. But when it's stuff like casting environment, I feel like that has quite a bit of impact, especially at the levels you move towards to.
Mhm.
So, how would you say, both in terms of like pressure and workflow, you had to adapt your casting environment towards stuff like the LPL?
Oh, so that was hard because workflow wise, I can tell you that it was non-stop because it
Mm,
was 4 broadcasters, 2 play-by-plays and 2 color casters for the span first of 4 or 5 days. And
yeah.
then in 2019, when I joined, by the way, the other play-by-play, his voice shot out because he was quite fresh. So I ended up doing a lot of that. So workflow, the adaptation was like, hey, suddenly you have consistency casting the same teams, and like you need to prep and do that same level of prep that you were doing for one show day a week that I was doing back in Australia, or like, you know, like 2 show days a week max
Mm,
for teams that don't really have much data out there. To here's a wealth of information, and they've got history like RNG and IG got a wealth of information back to like 2013 and 2011 respectively, and you can go back and you can research the history and you can add all that into the car, and it was just like, oh, it was overwhelming. And so I felt like my workflow was just, it forcibly changed because of
yeah.
the environment I was in. Like LPL, I would say if I went to, I guess there is no modern day LPL, if I went to like an LCK, a modern day LCK where there's a decent sized casting team, and yes, they're all kind of on day by day, but they do have days off. I think it'd be a very different story. But because it was like always on, and in later years it was 7 days a week for an English broadcast, like that workflow cooked. So yeah, I'm sorry, I got completely distracted by that. I'm
No,
remembering the
no,
fact that
no.
LPL was like, oh yeah, like the workflow was so.
No, I definitely wanted to talk about the workflow of LPL, and I'm
Oh
gonna
my
bring back
god.
some PTSD here a little bit. COVID time, free best of threes 5 times a week.
Yeah.
How is that?
Yeah. So I also forgot that wasn't 7 yet. It wasn't 7 days a week because that came later when we had a bigger team. But they had an unofficial broadcast, and then when the 4 of us were in the country, there were meant to be 2 more,
Mm,
and Clement couldn't make it, and then Sheen couldn't make it, so there were meant to be 3 and 3. But there was 4 of us: me, Lyric, Dagda, and that was his first year in like a major broadcast, and then Munchables. I think the same can be said again, and it was like we were stuck there. I had to kind of show the guys like how to live in China because it's very overwhelming. It's very different from, you know, Munchables UK or Dagda Ireland, and it was just like, okay, you guys have come in. They've now locked down. We started the split, by the way. We started like the first split,
mm,
and then we are doing a bit of casting, and then there was a bit of fear, and people went back home because we didn't know what was going on. We then came back in March, and then that was the real boogie. That was like the, okay, yep, 5 days a week, 3 best of 3s. They had to cram it all in because players were getting sick and like people had to do it remotely, and then we were there casting from the studio every single day. But like there were some days where like, okay, look, we've got to do 3 best of 3s ourselves, and overwhelming is a good word. I think chaos is another really good word because half the time, like we just couldn't prep. We just had to feel based on what we've been casting and watching. We had those 2 days off didn't exist because LPL was still playing on them. We just didn't have an English broadcast. So we're essentially working 7 days a week. And I was working with 3 other guys who were just thrown in the deep end. And for me, it was like, okay, cool. I'm kind of like a team leader now, but I've been here for a year and I have no idea how we're going to do this. Somehow we did, but like that was severe burnout. I remember a week being bedridden from working, like 3-4 months nonstop, and then another 3 months nonstop. And so, yeah, that was like doing the reps, though. You do the reps with anything. You go to the gym, you do the reps, and even if like you're not doing something super correct, if 80% you're pulling off the movement like mainly correct, you're gonna get better. And I think that's what it really did. Like that time was rough, but it gave me so much because I then actually got to cast league like an actual full-time job, even more so.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely think being thrown in the deep end is one of the best ways to learn in a way,
Yeah.
because with casting, especially play by play, there's so much you have to learn. Even
True.
when it's like later and later on, it's that aspect of, okay, well, I've started this, but now I need to perfect it, right?
Yep.
So, for instance, like breathing with your diaphragm when you're casting, or
Mhm.
getting a singing coach, for instance, to help
True.
you project a little bit more. But it's so difficult. And I want to kind of segue on with that difficult sense of the fact you said you had to fly out to China, right? That's where the LPL is. Dagda
Mhm.
also had to, especially coming from Ireland. Now, a lot of casters, especially people who are in my boat, we are starting to go to different parts of the country. For instance,
Yep.
I'm going up to North England soon to go cast a final for the UK Overwatch.
Oh, cool, man.
Thank you. I'm very excited for it.
Congrats, yeah.
But for instance, what are the challenges for living in such a new environment that you have to adapt to as a caster? Because everything is fully out the window now, right?
Yeah, it is, because usually when you move to that new environment, and I'll give the LPL example again, you move with short notice. So LPL was like 2nd or 3rd of January.
Hmm.
Then I started on the 10th or 11th. Like I had a week.
Wow.
So it's the turnover where you don't actually have time to adjust and learn about your environment, where you get plunked in a house because, some of your colleagues helped. Thankfully, I had Clement. Clement and Raz were already there at the time. They'd been there a year previously, and I think it was Clement who helped sort me out the house. I, got in rental. Here's how you pay it. This is the card you need. The next day we went to the bank. We did all this, and it was like, go, go, go. Because again, yeah, I barely had a week and a half to get in or get in anyway. And I think the biggest thing is like the fact that you don't have until your day off or your time off to learn about the environment that you're in. And maybe that's good, because for a lot of gamers, like no culture shock or no worries about where you've moved to,
Hmm.
because you're in a completely new environment that you don't explore, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but the simple answer to the question is that because I moved there and it was so quick, like my culture shock was like, oh my God, no one speaks English. But then again, I'm surrounded by English expats because I'm working, on a League of Legends broadcast where they all speak English and they're all friendly and they're all welcoming. And it's like I'm in this little bubble. I think that's how it's like a little combat towards it. But then, yeah, when I had time off, I was like, whoa. When I started exploring like Shanghai and I was like surrounded by Chinese people, I'm like, I got to learn the language. And then that also helped out.
Casting Chinese coming soon. You heard it
Oh yeah,
first.
jeez. No, I'm 5-10 years off that. I haven't kept up my Mandarin at all. Like if I stayed in China, I reckon by now, yeah, I think I'd be fluent. But unfortunately, I did not have that same
Ah,
opportunity.
I mean, it happens. I mean, I think it's most definitely when you go away for a cast, let's say a different
Yep,
country, you kind of enter that pressure cooker in a way
true.
of, if you're, being pushed into the deep end a little bit of, okay, well, you've got this time to prepare. I think that would be a lot easier on the culture, because you're kind of, as you said, in that bubble, right?
Yeah.
You're not really going to exploring, so you don't really need to worry about that exterior factors so much. But talking of exterior factors, I kind of just want to, at the start of this, talk about your movements and going to different countries and casting different leagues. So my question to segue onto that would be, what sparked the move from the LPL to the LEC?
So at this point, when LEC was I mean, it wasn't in a discussion, right? Like 2023, I was broadcasting from home because since COVID, I had to leave China. And the short context of the end of the story is that 2020, like our visas were expiring, and to get back in, we mucked around. We went to Taiwan for a bit. Then we went to Hong Kong, back to Taiwan, or one of those orders. Went to Hong Kong. They wouldn't let us in. And so we went home. And so it was like, okay, the English casters went home. It was just me and Lyric at that point, who were only left in China. We went home, and then I went through quarantine in Australia. And then it was like, okay, we're doing a remote broadcast. It was too difficult to get back into China unless it was for like finals or something. And so many years have gone by until 2023, which I was broadcasting from home. And then I finally got a Worlds opportunity that year. So I got asked to come into Worlds, which is awesome. It was in South Korea. And I guess also doing remote broadcasts from Australia, it was close. So it was good to know that I was a viable option because I was also quite close. And I've been working on LPL for quite a while now. That was my 5th year of LPL. And then when I was at Worlds, they were like, oh, we got like opportunities for guest spots in the start of like January for LEC. And I was having a chat, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'd be super interested, because my wife and I had planned a honeymoon after our wedding that year to go and explore Europe for 2 months, whatever. And we thought, okay, we'll end it in Berlin. So I did the guest spots, and I must have made an impression of some sort. They liked it. And then they were like, look, there's more opportunity. We have a position. And it was still kind of like a guest spot over 2024 this is. But it was more like, yeah, like, we'll keep giving you a gig because as a contractor, you can call it whatever you want. It's a contract gig. And then ever since, yeah, like I've been seen as core coming into this year. And like, I don't know. I worked really hard in 2023. I think from LPL, it was like a year where I kind of found my personality, who I wanted to be. And Riot seemed to like that at the international broadcast. I brought that into the show in Korea. And I think that kicked open the door for LEC for me. Because, yeah, it was just meant to be a guest spot. And then I think right time, right place, I filled a position, and I'm still here. So I must be doing something right.
Must be. But you talked about casting from home for a little bit, right? That 2023 time span. So a lot of casters, especially in the lower leagues, right? Well, I say lower leagues, it's kind of how it is. We're not in the broadcast depth of the LPL or stuff like that yet. So a lot of at-home casting happens, right?
Yep.
So my query would be, what's the typical day in aspect of comparing that to something like Worlds? Like, what is the level of prep that you have to do at home compared to Worlds, right? It's got to be some level of drastic.
Oh, it's completely different. At home, you'll crack open Leaguepedia, like, and not to say you don't do this at Worlds, or I'll compare in a second, but like, you might just crack open Leaguepedia, you just look at some stats of teams, rewatch VODs, whatever. You don't have as much content flowing around the space, because obviously when you're doing broadcasts from home, usually the players are at home as well, or the orgs, the tournament might not be as big, so you don't have as much player content, whether it's teasers, whether it's players interacting more with the community or with each other, or scrims, so on and so forth. That can still happen, but I think it happens more in a live environment, where while going to like an international, I'll go and prep, like I'll do Leaguepedia and I'll do everything, and I'll do Game of Legends, whatever the website may be. But I'll also start exploring like interviews. I'll start exploring what the player's been doing in the location, right? Like things they've said, because you're going to draw more out of them. Internationals, the greatest thing is like you see the players out and about in the country absorbing the culture, something that can be used for a cast. Might not be as like instinctive for a caster to use it, but like a lot of that stuff can be adapted to cast. I think like some of the teasers are a great example, because obviously the production value goes up, and at internationals they have more content that goes out that you can also latch onto. So not only is like your prep mirrored a little bit from what you're like at home in a home broadcast, but you can then use that stuff. You can use stats, and you can use emotional content, I like to call it, of players reacting, or players and teasers, or maybe scrims like live at the venue, or not live at the venue, live at the country, right? Like, for example, when Korea comes over or came over for Worlds last year, it was like, okay, Faker's in EU West, and there's heaps of content of what he's doing in solo queue. Like, it wasn't Showmaker. I can't remember the player who had like an 80% win rate. It was like that was talked about a lot. This guy is like undefeated. He's destroying solo queue right now. While a basic example, I think it's a very good example of like the ecosystem changes at these big internationals where everyone's involved, and obviously there's more players from more regions. So it's always going to be a loaded question where it's like, yeah, you don't have people that are just in this domestic environment that are also playing from home that don't get to interact with the other teams as much outside of maybe their solo queue. Where internationals, you just have this wealth of information because everyone's talking to everyone. There's so much more content coming out. There's obviously a bigger budget. And that's the joy. Like internationals kind of write themselves. Also, let's not forget other casters that you get to meet from those regions. And it's like, okay, Emily Rand, Azale, or whoever from NA Broadcast, like, tell me what TL do. Like, what do you guys think TL do? I watch this. I think this. They'll be like, yeah, but during the early season, they didn't do this. And I'm just like, it's internationals. The prep is insane. Like, I have big prep days and like I have 12-hour prep days, even as a play-by-play, because I want, I want to know what teams do. I want their play styles. I want to know what players have been up to. I want to know like what I'm going to be talking about. And it's not going to be scripted, but it's like, I just want that foundation. And that level of effort doesn't come with online broadcasts. Even when I was doing LPL back then, like I'd prep a little bit at Game Peter and VODs, but also the intensity didn't help. The fact that I didn't have time to prep that much because I was always on show. But yeah, that's kind of the rundown. It's like international's a wealth of information. You just have to know where to look, and that's always new people to internationals like myself in 2023 Korea. That was obviously my issue where I was just like, oh my God, where do I start?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you talked about domestic environments, right? Something I think is a little bit important is kind of finding that breakthrough of, your personal prep day. Mm-hmm. So for instance, I remember when doing research, like tongue twisters, that little bit of that wine cork you said.
Yep.
And then stuff like just having that honey or tea beforehand. So I am going to ask another question on top of that of, when you have your personal prep day, you will do that, research beforehand, but what's the difference and what's the contrast of comparing those two together of per se, okay, well, I'm prepping at home, maybe I'll do a couple of tongue twisters, compared to, okay, well, I'm now live in front of hundreds of thousands of people?
Yeah, I guess you want to know, like, do you mean the lead up on like the actual broadcast day when you're live?
Yeah.
So because I feel like habitually you want to make sure that if you're someone who's trying to succeed as a caster and you're trying to get into the field or you're just trying to get better, being able to practice enunciating or, using this cork in mouth thing to open your mouth more and so you have more dynamic vocals. Stuff like that is built as a habit. Whereas when you get to live, when you get onto broadcast and you're in front of all those people, like people now, like I might buzz my lips or I might just like enunciate blindly when I'm off camera, even if I'm live, just so I open my mouth more because I've already got those habits that have helped me build the, I like using the word foundation, the foundation for casting off air. And then when I get on air, it's like my brain remembers like what my practice has led to. It's like a bit of muscle memory with my mouth as well. And it's led me to a point where like, okay, I've done the hard work off broadcast and now I've got myself like these habits that have changed me on broadcast. And you do it long enough, then it creates more and more space. Or like, this is, oh my God, I'm opening my mouth so much more and I'm enunciating and I'm so much cleaner and clearer and easier to understand. When you're live in front of all those people, like that stuff should come as like a second nature, I think, eventually, as much as you do it. Did that answer it? Sorry, is that?
Yeah, no, it did. I mean, everyone has their own, right? But I'm kind of in a space where, I'm starting to get more and more, personal gigs. I mean, I don't want to talk about myself too much,
No, please.
It's the fact of a lot of lower casters. I mean, I don't like saying lower, but it's just how it is, right? We're not at that higher level yet. I mean, why not me, right? But people kind of struggle or not put enough importance on actual just prep, and I can kind of see it more and more within myself.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of segue on a little bit. You had that foundation of a lot of the stuff and prep is scripted. But for instance, when you were casting like the lower times, like maybe you were casting World of Tanks, or maybe it was that aspect of Rocket League, how much of it is actually improvised when it comes to a space of, okay, I don't have this information where I can prep. All I have from the broadcast is the player names.
So the less I would say, like, the less familiar I am with the broadcast, the more I prep for context. Like, you know, doing LEC every weekend, I would say that the prep is actually less than what I did for a World of Tanks broadcast, just because I'm there and I absorb LEC, and like I'm there all the time. I watch it all the time. I live it all the time. Like it's built into me. Whereas I look at the comparison of what I did for World of Tanks, and maybe you could argue because I was a lesser caster back then, lesser skilled, that could be a consideration. But like, I would go into the broadcast with heaps and heaps of prep, and I would use like 20% of it, because I think when you prep, a good ratio is like you have that to lean back on, but you'll probably use 20% of it because you don't want it to sound overly scripted. You don't want to go into a broadcast and sound like everything you've written down is just getting blurted out. And a lot of people do that because they think that, oh, I'm prepared for this situation, this situation. You can't prepare for all situations, but they prepare for as many situations as they can. And then it's like there's no soul in it. There's no heart in it. There's no real person in there. It sounds robotic. And when I was in World of Tanks, I sometimes just had to bite the bullet and be like, okay, I've prepped for all this, but like, yeah, now I have to improvise because I don't know what the hell's going on. And I've just got to kind of do the manual labor of like following along with the co-caster who's going to walk me through. I was casting with Elfish Guy at the time. He's still, you know, banger caster and OCE, big shout out. And he's a good multicaster where his prep would always pay off, but at times he'd have to improvise as well, and I'd follow his lead. And that's always because improvisation is a good sign, is a great sign of a great caster. If you can improvise with a situation given to you and sound like you know what you're talking about, or even being real with the audience, being like, I don't know what's going on, but I love it, or you know, like just showing a bit of emotion, then I think that's a sign of a great caster. So yeah, back then I had to talk a bit of BS, and those experiences I was saying to you earlier in the show were a really good example of me developing like who I was with personality and going through and showing how fluid I was with different broadcasts and different games. And you kind of had to be, because like with all the League of Legends prep I was doing and all the other games and Rocket League at the time, it was like doing another game. I put the prep into it, but I also need days off. So I'm going to fail somewhere here, and I'm going to rely on improv no matter how much prep I've done.
100%. I mean, that kind of answered a question I was thinking of, where it's like, well, how do you handle broadcast like disruptions? How do you keep your rhythm, stuff like that? And I think the general consensus of what it is just learn how to waffle a little bit.
Yeah, it is, because like as a caster, I don't know, you never know what's going to come. As I just said before, you never know what's coming, and you do have to waffle a little bit. And the better you get at casting, the more your waffle sounds just like fun downtime that sounds so charismatic. And for different casters, it's not going to be as charismatic, or there's going to be different like adjectives to use. But I like to think of like when my downtime comes along and I start talking about like the type of fridges that, you know, are really good, or I talk about like, I don't know, like someone else in the team saying something bad to me or whatever, and it just comes naturally. It's like I've just learned that skill because I've played with so much downtime, and I've known that I have to improvise. And you're going to get that through your career, and like it makes you better. It's like the same as I said with LPL. You do the reps of anything, and casting, it's like any other muscle, and you just get better and better. And your brain, you know, all those muscles as well that you have to use in a pause or in any downtime or on a desk or whatever. It's like they get better over time because you realize you're like, hang on a minute, maybe I'm not funny here, I'm not good here. Like, how do I improve that? And you can improve your improvisation. It's weird, but it's a skill like any other.
Yeah, 100%. You got to get the reps in. I mean, you can look at athletes and all, and, you know, use basketball, for example. They're not going to hit their shots if they don't put the reps in, right?
Sure.
But something that I want to keep on going from, I'm using this phrase a lot, but it's because it's one of my favorites. We move on with the fact of you have this sense of a broadcast, but I have a question from someone else who actually is quite a big fan, and it's like if Riot handed you like a briefcase and you open it up and it says you've got like full broadcast control, as a caster, what would you kind of look to add that may give you that like kind of boost onto the broadcast?
So anything on top of an existing broadcast, or okay,
A little bit of a hard one.
Yeah, it is, because I would add, like, if I had a briefcase that could add anything to a broadcast, I would add a pure day of bonding between the team where you're playing League. Let's say like the briefcase is about, okay, we're gonna pay whatever you want. I would pay for a 12-hour day of League of Legends or like a sport or anything between the current team, because that beats everything. Because bonding and like previously talking about respect and moving into a team and humbly just being a part of it, that bonding and that charisma you develop off each other and the way you can sync up, I think there's nothing more important than that. I spend time with, like, if you listen to my LEC casts, I think you can tell who I spend the most time with. And if people don't say me and Dagda, it's crazy. Like, I spend time with Vedius as well. I play Magic with Vedius. I play Magic with Dagda. But Dagda I've known through all these years, and it's through bonding. It's through going out, having drinks, going to dinner, like whatever. Dagda and I have spent a lot of time together. And he came to LEC first. But then when I came here, it's like nothing changed. Like, he's still like a very close friend. At the baby shower, he was here, like, helping out. He's almost like a part of the family. But bonding is so important for a broadcast. Even if you're an online broadcast, even if you're playing games with them, chilling out, saying stuff you wouldn't say on broadcast, because obviously, like, you got to have some kind of broadcast line. But learning about each other. If I had a briefcase to add anything to the broadcast, I'd add more days of bonding. If I could add multiple, I would. If people were available, I'd add, like, send them to an escape room. I'd a gaming day. It could be as simple as something like that. That's cheap, right? Or sports or anything. I would literally just pay for team bonding so that the team is stronger. Okay, I'm sorry about Berlin sirens. I don't know why they're so loud. It makes no sense. That out of everything, people might say like, add like more stats, or we might add, more spots for analysts. Like, yeah, sure, that could be helpful too. But I would just add more team bonding wherever I could, because it's what makes exceptional broadcasts. I listen to CS casters a decent amount. Like, I listen to Machine and Sponge. They're my favorite duo. And I listen to them. I'm like, these guys must be close. They must be chill, because like they bounce off each other well. There's good amounts of humor. Their setup is incredible. Like, they seem so locked in every single cast. And that kind of consistency, I think, can only come from being friends. And if they're not friends, I don't know. This whole segment needs to go somewhere else. But like, it just seems like there's good bonding there,
100%. I mean, talking about bonding is something that I'm quite important about, especially with the fact that when it comes to our uni, we have a different caster, like, on every single broadcast. If you're consistently on it, yes, you're doing well, right? But sometimes I can be casting one game, I'll have one person this week, and then suddenly next week that person won't cast again for 3 more weeks, right? So something I would like to comment on that I think kind of helps that instant team bonding within the casters is, do you have a method for syncing up with your other caster? For instance, especially when like team fights erupt, is it like, oh, point at each other, or is it like a tug on the shirt, something like that?
No, because earlier on, I'd use a lot more hand signals, but for duo casts especially, like, unless something's urgent, they'll put their hands up, or I'll come in, like, or I might even just point. But like, for a team fight, I mean, they're all the best of the business, and the color casters I work with, they'll just know when to stop. Their handoffs are good. Again, it's that repetition. They've done it so long, it's like a no-brainer. Oh, the fight's happening, they'll drop. And like, rarely do I ever have an issue with someone who doesn't drop off for a team fight for me, right? Because if I do, I'll just start talking over the top, and then they'll know to cut off anyway. But all the LEC guys, like, it's such a no-brainer. In the past, I might have told you, yeah, I'll like, when I was in 2016 Open Ladder in Oceania, we're doing a lot of, pick up handoff training and like really basic stuff. But now for me, I never have a problem with that, because the guys I work with are like the top 0.1%. Just to give them a bit of ego, but it is true. Where the craft of casting, they've got everything down, like foundationally so down and so built up, that I don't I don't need to worry about anything like that. So no.
Oh,
I guess it's my context.
that would be so lovely if that was how it worked.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard though, right? Because like, you know, people go like, "Oh, I wish that worked with me and my duo, or I wish that worked between us as casters," but it will one day.
Yeah,
You know,
hopefully.
you just got to keep putting the reps in, like everyone else has done. No one in my team didn't start out as crap. Like Vedius and Dagda at some point, they were crap casters. They were. We all were. And you go back to my 2015 VOD of me and Oceania, the Oceanic Challenger series, my headset started falling off like this, and I was too scared. It was stuck under the stool. The cable like this was stuck under the stool, and I was moving. And so it was going like this. And I was panicking, and I was just, I didn't move because I didn't know what to do. And the producer eventually had to say, Hysterics, can you pull your headset up? And I just like, okay, that's the go ahead, right? We were all crap. And eventually you will find that dynamic. Eventually you'll get to the point where you don't need hand signals. And it might take you casting with the same person, or it might take you casting with so many different people that you know, like a level of standard. And some people you do have to coach. Some people you do have to use hand signals for team fights to come in. Like it's a rare case, but sometimes I do. Right. But on the whole, like I don't, because I'm lucky and I'm graced enough that I just work with casters that do world finals, you know, and MSI finals, people that consistently land grand final positions because they're the best.
100%.
So,
I mean, talking about working with the best, right? And then putting in the reps over all of these years since like 2016 that you've been casting, right? I have a strong question, especially from experience with play-by-play casting, and it is, how do you keep things fresh? Of course, you have moved games from like Rocket League to League, but it's been League for a consistent amount of years now, right? So it's the fact of, how do you keep stuff fresh with vocabulary, for instance, not saying the same word over and over and over, and, you know, keeping that progress linear?
because this is a great question, by the way, because I've actually over this year have started like really going deep into my casting, because I feel like personality and broadcast, I'm there, right? It's consistent. I worked on personality for a while. My casting suffered a bit. I fell into traps where like now I think I have a lot of repetition and I'm not keeping it fresh, right? But I'm looking at how I slow down my casting. How do I slow down my calls? How do I weave more poetry in or sound more poetic? How do I weave more story in? How do I make it a beautiful piece of art, like this long 5-sentence team fight? And that's why it's such a great question, because it's hard. It's simply breaking it down, and then again using repetition to be like, okay, I'm going to bring this word in. I'm going to bring this word in. Like I might look at word of the day, right? I'm trying to work out like how I improve my vocabulary, because my vocab is actually not that strong. And as a play-by-play, I think it would help me if I had more words to lean on. Like Medic is very good with his vocabulary. He's very punchy with it as well. And my goal right now is, how do I sound different? How do I continue sounding different? And how do I not sound like maybe another Flowers or another Medic or another Dracos, another Atlas, another Valdez, anyone else who I've missed? Like, how do I not sound like another League caster that anyone's already listened to? And the answer is self-reflection and repetition to find out what you do best, because everyone's different, right? Everyone's unique. And when someone listens to my cast, they shouldn't listen to it. They shouldn't hear anyone else's cast. You might see similarities to certain things, but they shouldn't compare me like, oh, this guy sounds just like this guy. Like, that's when I know that maybe I'm copying, either unintentionally or intentionally. Like, I need to sound like myself. So the simplest way to answer this is, if you break down one bit at a time and find out, okay, why, and it might be from community sentiment, it might be from opinion. Why do I sound like them? Or why do I sound like someone else? Or why does the community not like me? Or so on and so forth. Break down one piece of the cast that maybe people are referring to. Look at the first 15 minutes maybe and go like, so what am I doing wrong here? What am I not adding? Compare it to someone else. And compare it to someone else. And compare it to someone else. And different play-by-plays, for example, in the role, where you see what they're doing in the first 15 minutes of a game. And that might be like, oh, actually, I can pick this up. Or and I can pick this up off Atlas. Or and off of Flowers. And it's not the sake of copying. It's like, I'm learning to see what the very best do. And I'm adding that to my cast. And then over the years, as you continue developing and you add things in, you'll tweak them and you'll change them and you won't be the same. But yeah, it's a really good question, because I think when casters get up to the top, and I'm not there yet, like as soon as I cast the World Finals, I'll consider myself near the top. When I get to that point, I'll consider myself like, okay, now what? How do I change? And like, what do I add in that's new? What can I do to keep this both fun for the viewers and different for the viewers and for me? That's what's a really good part of that question.
Yeah, I've no like vocabulary is especially difficult when your style is a little bit faster or stuff starts to get repetitive. For instance, like a meta in League and you're just seeing the same thing over and over again. It's like, okay, well, how do I keep this fresh? It's a little bit hard, but you know what is hard? I'm going to give you a little bit more of a, you got to think about it question. So if your whole casting journey was, you know, put into a documentary, right? What is one moment for you that would have to be in there?
The Gen G Top Esports MSI best of 5 that went to 5 games, where it was to date the biggest cast, where I was kind of just like, holy crap, like I'm here. And even though I did Worlds and the first Worlds was kind of like that as well, where I'm casting an international, like I'd say that would be in there for sure. Like day one, I think I was casting with Azale or Kobe. And it was my first ever cast with people that weren't domestic to my region and to people that I've been watching for ages, like Kobe. Kobe and Azale, I would message them and compliment them because I love their style. I love, listening to them in duos of Flowers, or it was Freak back then, or it was Drake, or anyone. So the day one of Worlds, where I finally, quote unquote, made it, finally, like got to an international after 8 years of doing League of Legends, that'd be a huge one for me. But a real big one is Gen G Top Esports, when I did that best of 5, when I'm casting some of the teams that I cast for ages, like Top Esports back in the day. I love that team, the dynamic, and it was Cream versus Chovy. And there's a line I had that I scripted that I was really happy with, where, people kept talking about the Church of Chovy over and over again, and they always do, right? It's the Church of Chovy, and I wrote it to death a little bit when Gen G were doing well, but in that series when it was going to 5, when Cream, he didn't do anything special in the team fight, but I said, if there is a Church of Chovy, then we better make a cult of Cream.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that, where I'm like, I get to talk about the big players. That would hit high for me, because you hear the crowd. I think MSI that year, where was it? We're in China? Yeah, it was in China. So the Chinese fans were going nuts at Top Esports winning. And when you hear that level of energy, like I was used to at LPL finals, but like hearing even more people, international, the rivalry, it's just, I think that would be one of my big moments, because it was the furthest I've ever cast. It was such a big ticket to earn. It was round 2 of MSI, but it may as well have been like a quarterfinals, similarly to Worlds. I think that's the level of the bracket it was at, because there was, I think it went round 2 to round 4. You skip, and that's like a semis, upper bracket, and then I can't remember in 2024, but that for sure would be in there. Outside of maybe all the times I cast the Shy in LPL in his prime in 2019 spring, that also would be there. Any game from the Shy then was crazy. Anything from the Shy in 2019, that would have to go in there. Oh my god, that guy was crazy as hell.
Caedrel likes him for a reason.
True, very true.
No, but I think every caster individually most definitely has that moment of, this is what I'm recognized for. And I remember seeing that quote that you said actually on Instagram, like ages ago when the match was happening, and like a picture of Chovy with it and stuff like that. It was so nice to see. But when we talk about best of 5s and stuff like that, is something that I find quite difficult, especially as a play-by-play caster, giving as much as I can, is how do you like maintain your energy and vocal control during these, drawn out matches? When it hits that best of 5, how do you give as much energy as you were in the beginning without compromising your voice?
It's about planning. When you're going into a best of 5, and sometimes you think this could go the distance, even more so then, you're taking a step back and be like, look, game 1, I'm going to bring out the energy in the fights, but I can't go to a 9 or a 10. You know, like, unless it's crazy, if the game's crazy, it's chaotic, and it's like these fights are just micro masterclasses, everyone's popping off, then that's different. But the majority of the time, you just got to take it easy and be like, how do I build up the series, and what am I capable of? And a lot of times in a best of 5, I'll get to game 4, and maybe I have started losing my voice. I've started straining my voice, and it goes to a game 5, and I want to give it the best, and I'm struggling a little bit. It's those exercises that you do before that I've talked about in many videos, where you are doing diaphragmatic breathing. I know you talked about at the start, or you are, you're doing your tongue twisters to warm up your mouth and get ready for, a big series. Because best of 5s do take it out of you, and they are really hard series to cast. And when there's an audience behind you as well, a lot of your training and your exercises are kind of drowned out, because yes, you can hear yourself in your ear, and that's really good. Like, if any new casters want tips on not blowing out their voice, make sure your side tone, fallback and side tone are technically different things, but make sure your in-ear is working so you can hear yourself speaking in live. Of course, you don't want to delay, otherwise that throws you off. And that way, you don't have to stretch as much, because with noise-canceling headphones, you speak louder naturally because you can't hear yourself. You don't know how loud you're speaking. So it's very easy to blow out your voice when you don't have side tone. You need proper side tone. You need your voice channeling into your ears on events, always. The higher or the louder the energy in the crowd and the louder people are, the higher my side tone is. And at times it might be like almost too loud for my ears, but I just push through it because the audience is so loud. Like MSIs and stuff, I'll need mega side tone, because otherwise I'll hurt my voice. And if I'm doing back-to-back days, it's like I don't want to ruin my voice, so that I come back and the next day and I can't do another best of 5. Yeah, a lot of preparation in terms of stretching and vocal movements and vocal warm-ups. That's the way you get through those best of 5s. Like, get your voice ready. Don't shout and scream beforehand. Like, that's obviously dumb. Like, make sure you're doing these vocal warm-ups and have hot tea on standby, honey, etc., things that are good for your voice. Don't have lots of I think energy drink can be quite detrimental at times. Like, channel whether you need the energy or you need your voice more. And things like sugar and milk, like, obviously look up what is going to create more phlegm and create it harder to voice. Like, singers have a lot of this stuff already down packed. It's good. We're not going into a new industry. There's been entertainers who use their voice for hundreds of years, whether it has been singing or some form of entertainment. They know all the tips and tricks have been worked out by now. So there's a lot to Google there, and make sure that you're not ruining your voice beforehand, but you're also warming it up nicely and gradually moving up to the live series, which is going to use a lot more of it.
Yeah, 100%. Most definitely, I think when you're casting those bigger live events, it's a lot harder to keep your voice. I mean, you want to give the crowd energy to start off the bat with, but then you don't want to be lackluster when it comes to match 5, for instance, and suddenly you can't scream in a big team fight anymore because your whole voice is gone. But talking about MSI and worlds and stuff like that, that's quite a big success mark, right? Especially towards the earlier days of your casting, 2016. You wouldn't have thought maybe I'm going to go to worlds in Korea one day. So success probably back then to you, I would assume so, looked more like I want to get worlds one day. But coming afterwards now from casting worlds, casting MSI, what does success in a definition change look like to you now?
It's more about placement in the series I get. Just being a part of it and doing play-ins for worlds was huge. The worlds afterwards that I did in 2024, which I'm trying to think, where did we go? It was in Berlin. And me being able to do, group stage, for example. I think in 2023, I also did group stage, actually, surprisingly. And back then it was, just an appearance at the event. Amazing. I'm here. I finally got my dream. And it was a big weight off my shoulders. But then straight away, I was like, okay, I've done this right after the event. I'm like, now next time I want to go further. And MSI, I did go further. I did 2 best of 5s. I did BLG, PSG, which was also a banger series.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I did
it was.
a Gen G Top Esports. Yeah, I got lucky. And I did what I would call the equivalent of a quarterfinal, or a bit before that, whatever. I did 2 big best of 5s at an international event. That was huge. Then I went to Worlds, and it was a Berlin, and I did the stuff I usually do. And I was like, cool, okay. Next event, I want a quarterfinals. I want to work up to the point where Riot sees me good enough to handle a best of 5 at the biggest event of the year at World Finals, where there's only 4 of them. And we have other play-by-plays again, like Dracos, Medic, Atlas, Captain Flowers. You know, and I think technically Azal now, right? And Azal's also a play-by-play. But I always see him as a color because I think he's a really, really good color. So that's just what I identify him as. So these people are people like I kind of grew up my casting career around. Atlas especially was back in OPL, and, you know, I admired him back when he was in OCE, and then he went to Korea, and I was like, okay, I'm going to follow in his footsteps. Dracos, always, I remember seeing those big ticket events where, like, he's been around for the longest time, and his way with words was always sick. And, you know, Medic, his energy, his vocab I talked about before is incredible. And then Flowers obviously has had some, you know, biggest punches in League of Legends history, where he's just, you know, his power is unbelievable. His raw power, energy, and his, it's crisp. So I look at these people, and I'm like, if I'm good enough to get a quarterfinal, granted, like I might get it because they need people for semis, but then it's kind of the validation that I'm looking for, that Riot sees me as, okay, he can hold big enough in a big moment. Because my biggest problem has always been the fact that, like, I'm great for downtime. I'm good for mucking about and, like, LEC average game where, like, Vitality are running it, and I'm laughing at Hiller saying, like, because he's just running it, and I'm going to be raw and I'm going to be straightforward. It's not always super appropriate, but it's real, and I like to be real with the audience. To that step of, like, hey, he can also hold the hype. He's got the power. He's comparable to the other guys, and he brings a unique feel to this, and we need him in quarterfinals. That's what I want. And then obviously it'll step up to, like, how do I get a semifinals? How do I get a grand finals? That will be the progression, and I really hope I can, you know, make that progression. That to me is success. The grand finals is like, I've hit the pinnacle of League of Legends, and to me that is success.
Yeah, 100%. I think progression is something very important in casting that a lot of people don't notice too much. It's not always linear progression. You know, sometimes you hit that plateau and it's a bit like, okay, well, maybe I'm not getting onto a bigger broadcast, but, you know, I'm working on my casting. I'm VOD reviewing in my own time. I'm making sure that my vocab is fresh, and I'm trying to improve on that consistently. But something I would like to say for the last question of this would be, imagine you were around my age again, right? So 19, with kind of a small casting portfolio, you know, with the experience you have today in a way, how would you approach breaking into a scene like the LEC or aiming for bigger broadcasts?
I would first take everything around me, whether it is casting, whether it is production, whether it is producing, whatever it is. Letting people know your intentions, that, hey, I really want to grow and I want to learn everything around the scene, because that's what I did. Now, I got paid for it, luckily enough, but go back to 2016, I wasn't getting Oceanic Challenger Series anymore. I wasn't actually getting the cast. Riot were giving it to other people and trying around, and it wasn't until ESL picked it up in, maybe it was halfway through 2016 that they did. But end of 2016, I did the OPL finals. One of them was at a Luna Park, which is like a theme park. The other was up in Queensland, and it was up in a venue. I said to ESL, I said, I just want to be a part of it. I said, I'll do whatever. I went around the whole of this theme park taping Ethernet cables up high with gaffer tape throughout the whole thing. And 80 hours in the week I worked. 80 hours. I worked in restaurants before. I'd never worked an 80-hour week. Okay, I did a couple of times, but I never worked an 80-hour week like this, where I was also the driver. I would go to the airport, Sydney Airport. I'd pick people up, drive back to the venue. I would do it like 5-6 different people, drive them to the venue, and then boom, done. That was my job. And then I also did all this taping and stuff. I worked my ass off. And in the end, it was like I got to be around OPL, and like I said, hello to people, whatever, but they were all busy preparing for production and their show. But I got the experience that was so invaluable to me. And also I got a great name. And it wasn't just about getting the name with the company, but it was like I absorbed so much that I felt like it made my perspective of the scene and like how to grow so much better. And I was like a sponge, right? And also it helps that like with the CEO of ESL Australia and with all those people, like I still, I got called back for events throughout the years. Hell, even back when I was in Australia in 2022, 2023, I did a guest spot on LCO, and that was from relationships I developed back in the day. I also got opportunities to do a bit of Valorant. Actually, I got a Valorant weekend because I inquired and they're like, "Oh yeah, we know who he is now." I have that recommendation maybe for the rest of my casting career, maybe the rest of my life, right? Because I put in the hard work. I didn't bitch and moan and complain. I just did what was needed to be done, what was asked of me. I put my best foot forward. I put my hard work forward. Not only did I get something for myself and I got paid, thankfully enough, but also like I create an impression on the people around me because you don't know who's going to get you forward in life. And you're obviously not going out there to make impressions so that you get forward and so that you get put forward by these people. Like I'm just doing it for good reputation. But it's like, that's why I say you do your best for everyone, no matter what, because someday if you don't, it'll come back to bite you where it's like, no, I've worked with that person and I don't like them or they didn't do well for me. But they know that I'll do everything, even if I didn't know how to put cables up, which I didn't. Like, I'm willing to learn. And reputation is everything in esports. And if people are wondering, how do they get a step up? How do I get to the next broadcast, right? Being in the right time in the right place also has a factor to it. But if you can put effort into each and every day you're working on broadcast, and if you can actually put your best foot forward and you be a pleasure to work with and you show that you're willing to learn and, you be real with yourself. Like, if you're not better than if you're worse than you're showing yourself as, then that's a real problem. It's like it's maybe too much confidence, too much ego. Just be real with everyone around you. And I think taking every single gig you can will get you so far in life. And that's every gig. And if you have to work for free, work for free. Think of the end goal. Think of why you're doing it. People are so hung up on like, I should be getting paid for this. I should be getting paid for this. I did open ladder for like a year. No payment whatsoever. I worked at a restaurant in the meantime because I used my brain and I said, look, I want casting to go somewhere, but I know I have to be stable. And yes, I was living with parents at the time, which is lucky, but I was like, I want a future. And financially, this is the best decision because I can put all this effort into open ladder and I can also go and work, in the restaurant business to get money so that if there is an opportunity where I want to go full time into this and I like want to put everything into it, I have money. I have a financial bank account. Like I have a bank account that's going to help me and I'm going to be able to survive on my own for like a year or something. Right. It's so important. Like just take what you can get. There are so many limited jobs in esports, whether it's casting or anything else. Take what you can get and then work on how you develop into what you want while you're in that job, because there's always pathways that are open. Like I got more gigs from people at Riot because they suggested different people. Like I got a university championship back in 2017, 2018 because people were talking to me about it. And the casters I worked with were doing it. I'm like, oh, do you think I could do it? Yeah, sure. Why not? Because I was pleasure to work with. I became good friends with these people. Both my Oceanic Challenger Series casters that I've worked with were at my wedding. Like that, because, and obviously you're not going to get along with everyone. Context while I'm yapping away. You're not going to get along with everyone. Not everyone you work with is going to be a good friend for life or whatever, right? But being a pleasure to work with and being like there to support your colleagues and support the people you work with and working hard and being respectful and responsible and putting the leg forward, whether you're getting paid or not, is the way up. It always is. And when I see people like, oh, we're not getting paid or whatever, or I just think, just you started from the love of doing the craft.
100%.
And that's how it started for me. And I was just grateful that I could do what I wanted to do, which was casting in the end. And look at where it got me.
That's true. I mean, I think especially when talking about the love of the craft and stuff like that, the three words come up again, right? It's the fact of, be humble, no ego, and show respect.
Yeah.
All in the general. I mean, no one's going to want to work with you if you're, I'm the best caster around and everything like that. Even if you're in like a lower league, it's just going to be a bit like reputation's everything.
And let me interject by just saying one thing I missed out is like part of that is reaching out to your betters. Like I've had casters reach out to me and ask for feedback. And 99% of the time, those casts will be happy to help. And it also shows your willingness to grow and learn and how much you care about the craft. So, like, part of that is, again, don't be afraid to reach out to people. It's another way to step forward. That's another really, really big way I've talked about in my videos to step forward, because I have people that like complain. And I've seen this. They don't reach out to me. They've never reached out to me, or I've never heard them reaching out to other people. And it's like, you know, you do have pathways. You do have ways to get better, and getting
100%.
better also opens up more doors.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about myself for a little bit and then we're going to wrap it up. But the quote that I absolutely hated when I was younger, my parents would tell it to me so often, is you get out what you put in.
Yeah,
Every single time.
100%.
Every exam, you get out what you put in. You don't study, you're not going to pass. Right. And I think I've learned to apply that, especially at a younger age, compared to stuff like casting. It's like, okay, am I casting my main time? No. Okay, cool. I'm not going to improve. Am I reaching out to like Discord servers for, okay, can I cast this event? Even if it's a random game that I've never touched before, am I able to cast it? Will that help me improve? I do not care if I'm not getting paid, especially if it's giving me experience.
Yeah, it's the 1% of people with your kind of mentality that go through and find success. Because I've had Discord servers before based around casting. I've had opportunities for people. I've said, hey, you know, cast together, whatever. And people, they leave because maybe, and maybe that's fine for them because it's not feasible. They go into different careers, whatever. Then there's other people that stay casting, but like they're never proactive with it. And so if you really want
100%.
this, if you really want this as a career, if you really want the opportunity one day to cast, like you're the right fit for the job. And because right now, by the way, the up and coming casters, I don't know who they are. Like I'll see like LPL unofficial English. They've got some casters, but like there's a lot of development needed. I look elsewhere and I'm like, okay, I see people from like NLC, for example, I think are an insane team for what they are. It's like if there were any big positions open, I'd put those people in straight away. But like outside of that, I look and see like who can facilitate a tier 1 esports role right now. And I think there's not much. And these people are getting old. Like people myself, I'm having babies, right? It can't go forever. Like I can't do this forever. There's people internationally, all the other guys from LTA, LCK, they're having families, getting married, moving on. How long does casting last for them? How viable is it for them? There is always an end point, and there's
100%.
always people that need to follow. So like the 1%ers will make it through. The people that can keep the grind going, and the people that like will keep working hard at it every day and be at the quality and the level that Riot or these other broadcasts will want to fill in those big positions, because they're huge shoes. And I think the problem right now, outside of a couple of people that I can name on top of my head, there's not people to fill those shoes currently.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the cookie crumbles, but I like to think a lot about why not me? Or what's the reason, right? I mean, you can put in the work on the side, show up when you need to, and even if it's not something that's financially going to benefit you, you may get something out of it later on. You don't know, right? It may be, you know, you're just getting some joy out of doing the gig for the gig, or it may be you don't know who's listening, right? Especially on Twitch, it doesn't say the name really of, you know, 50 people watching. One of them could be a CEO or something.
True. And it's a risk you pull that like maybe it's not a CEO, maybe it's no one important and never will be. But that's showbiz. That's it's entertainment, and like it's like any singer, any dancer, any songwriter, any performer, any actor. They might go through their entire life trying to get to that top position, trying to be like the next Leonardo DiCaprio, and they're not, right? Because it is the 1% or even the 0.1%. It's the rarity, and you know, you might have it, you might not. Like that's obviously a different conversation, but the best you can do is grind, because there are actors who have grinded their hearts out, who have made it to big positions and finally get in the spotlight. And like you think about it, an example that's not an actor or anyone, you think about like Warren Buffett, for example. That guy didn't make his first millions or billions or whatever until he was like 60 years old. It took him ages. He just kept grinding. He was consistent. He just kept going. And then eventually it all came due for him, but he was 60. Like that's ages. It's 60 years of his life. Okay, let's say like 35 years of investing, or 40 years, I think it was something like. So it's a great example to just remember you got to put in the work. And you're right. You get out what you put in.
100%. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. That has been
Pleasure.
the podcast today with Mr. Hysterics. If you would like to, just say all of your socials and stuff like that, I'm sure it's going to be somewhere in a corner on the bottom.
Nice. Yeah, so you can go to my main source is twitch.tv/hystericscast. That's where I am most of the time when I'm consistent. I am going to be doing an MSI restream for this event coming up for the EU fans because it starts at like 2 a.m. and I am like my pregnant wife. I'm not putting her through that. So, so I'm going to do a restream as per approved the other day. Outside of that, twitch.tv/hystericscast. Twitter, no, X, whatever. I don't really use X. Instagram's the same. If you type in Hysterics or Hystericscast, and I think I have TikToks where I put up a lot of content, and YouTube the same. YouTube's the same, but it's just Hysterics, and the YouTube is literally just all the same stuff on the other short form content, but I pretty much upload what I want, and yeah, just hoping to grow that because honestly, having a good brand, that's another thing for casters. Having a good brand, 100%. Having a big brand is something that you can really flex.
Your face is your brand, but a lot of useful stuff on Jake's YouTube. I would, put it forward a little bit. So if you do want to learn, most definitely give that a listen. My stuff will just be at the bottom of the screen. It will rotate. It's just Evan Palmer for majority of stuff. But thank you very much for coming on, and hopefully we'll see your face on the internet.
Yeah, happy to return if you want me as well.
100%. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.